Mic check, mic check. All right. Uno momento. All right, it looks like we're good. Just like that, we are live. Thank you so much for joining me on this fine Friday afternoon. Of course, we're going to talk some GameStop. We're going to talk about what's going on in the market as a whole. A lot of craziness right now. Another crazy week in the market. It's always a crazy week in the market, right? Whether it's GameStop or the stock market as a whole, there's ups, downs, lefts, and rights. So let's try and go through it all. But I appreciate you being here, whether you're watching live, watching it back. Appreciate you very much. And let's dive in. So, it was announced that GameStop upsized their offering by 450 million, right? So I'll have to add that to my notes here. Got to get this cleaned up a little. Got my charts updated. You can see year over year, revenue drop wasn't too bad compared to the prior year. And then obviously a nice jump in net income, but we could touch on all that later. Graphics kind of just show it all taking place over time. These are yearly, so those won't get updated yet. But so first, if we go into the news releases, on the afternoon of the 11th, the day after they reported earnings, the next day after hours, they're like, okay, we're doing an offering for 1.75 billion. And originally they said it could be upsized, I believe it was 300 million. Sorry, an extra 250 million. So it was originally like, okay, we're going to offer up some convertible notes. We're going to raise nearly $2 billion, either 1.75 or 2 billion if the buyers choose to upsize within that 13-day period. Then the next business day, they upsized the original offering to 2.25 and said, hey, if they want, they can up it another 450 million for a grand total of 2.7 billion. So that's what happened. And then we got a new filing on that. Where was it? Right over here. We got a new filing that on June 23rd, the initial purchaser elected to exercise in full such option, the green shoe exercise. And on June 24th, the company issued 450 million aggregate principal amount of additional notes. So to me, it's very evident there's a lot of demand for these convertible notes. So you can kind of think why that is, right, in terms of some of the stuff that happened back pre-2021, in terms of people betting against it in various ways through complicated swaps, other positions that are just not easily identifiable to just standard market data. So it's not like you can just look up short interest. People say, oh, well, the short interest is reset, right? But anyone who's followed the story for a while or you really read into it, it's just not that plain and simple. Sure, yeah, that's an aspect of the story, but it's just not that simple. It's much more complex than that. And for me, I just try and follow what the company's doing, focus on the fundamentals, cover the story as it's taking place in real time. And whatever's underlying in terms of suspicious activity with GameStop, in terms of people betting against it, shorting it, whatever the case, I say so be it. Whatever's at the bottom will bubble to the surface inevitably if the company succeeds. So really, all they have to do, in my opinion, is just drive forwards and provide long-term value to shareholders. And I think they're focused on that. We saw that, in their last report. They said in the investment policy, hey, we're going to buy Bitcoin, maybe some other stuff, and we're ultimately focused on shareholder value. So at this point in time, which we're going to add the note here, make this cleaner later on. What day was it? It was, okay, June 23rd. So we'll put that here. June 23rd, 125. Initial purchaser elected to exercise in full green shoe exercise. Okay, we can clean that up after. Come and think of it, I probably could have just copied and pasted it, but that's all right. Green toe. Green shoe. That's what it's called. But another 2.7 billion. So of course the naysayers are going to say, they're just stacking this cash. What are they going to do with it, right? But really it gives them so much flexibility. What I personally want them to do, I've been thinking about this lately, is I want them to buy more Bitcoin. I think what we're seeing right now in terms of the stock market as a whole, you might think, well, there's still uncertainty about tariffs. There's still, global war going on, right? Or not global war. It's not like a world war, right? We're not seeing that. I think people saying World War III, that's very overhyped. not hyped, but overblown, those sort of fears. But, there's some turmoil around the globe right now, right? Whether it's through trade or wars, disagreements, there's a lot of craziness going on. Yet, here we are. The stock market's at an all-time high, right? The stock market's at an all-time high. And you can see it clear here. So, to me, the reason for that is not, we got some good news out of it, right? Pausing of the tariffs, kind of seems like things are calming down in the Israel-Iran area, right, to an extent. But there's still a lot of craziness. But yet the market came roaring back, right? It peaked back in February, bottomed in April, and now, late June, we're back at an all-time high today, right? Did it close at an all-time high? It did. It did. First we hit it intraday, then we had a drop, right? If you look at S&P, went down, or I guess we could do it over here with the one day. Went way down in the afternoon after touching that new all-time high in the early morning, or I guess early afternoon you could say. Drops all the way down, comes all the way back, right? That's just the type of market we're in. And really, I don't think anything, fundamentally changed too much with the market. I think it's more so just we're in a situation where we're melting up, right? And I think it's been happening for a while on a long-term basis when you zoom out. And that's not to say, there aren't going to be market crashes. Like we had a dip here. We had a dip here. Obviously, we had 2022. That was a pretty major dip, or elongated dip, I should say. But for the most part, we've always come back pretty strong. And especially when you just look back from 2018, every dip has been pretty short-lived, right? Like, so peak to trough was from September to December in this period. There's only a few months. Over here, obviously, this was just a couple months, and it came roaring back. Over here, 2022 was a more so elongated one, but it wasn't as sharp of a downward move. So to me, that's just really a result of a general melt-up coming and happening in real time. What I mean by that is just the fact that we just always create more money, right? So part of this right here, this big jump is in M1 money supplies because, we just printed so much money, all the stimulus checks that were issued out, but also, some of it was a change in terms of how it's calculated. But overall, you could just see the money supply continues to go up. The United States debt outstanding continues to go up. And with interest rates remaining higher, that's just going to put pressure on government debt in terms of how much interest that's going to have to be paid and how much of our GDP is spent towards debt interest payments. Not even the principal, the interest payments, right? So it's just a snowball that just keeps rolling. And with all that being said, I feel like Bitcoin is really going to be, I don't want to say the biggest winner, but really an important hedge against that. So I feel like GameStop needs to acquire more Bitcoin, right? It doesn't have to be too ridiculous, enough where they are able to hold their cash comfortably. So when they see fit, I saw some people saying like, oh, well, they're waiting for the market crash. That's fine, but you can't sit around and wait around forever because in my opinion, there's this melt up happening in real time and the dollar's losing purchasing power, but also they don't want to rush to go spend that money and then spend it on the wrong thing, right? And then that hurts the idea of delivering shareholder value. So I feel like you want to have cash, ready to go to make the moves you want to make in business, but also you want to hold gold. I'm sorry, not gold. Maybe they could use some gold, right? But Bitcoin on the balance sheet, because if the dollar's losing purchasing power, that means Bitcoin is appreciating in value, right? Obviously, it's not that plain and simple, but generally speaking, that's the case because there's a finite amount of them. I don't know what's... Okay, this was the range that GameStop bought in originally. We don't know for sure. The filing came out on the 28th, right? So in theory, they probably bought around the price point we are at now, but it's possible they bought back here, right? Which would be really nice. But to me, it doesn't even matter that much what their entry point is, and I get it. People are zooming out and saying, well, look how high it is right now. It's at all-time highs. Yes, but so's the amount of money in existence. So's the amount of U.S. debt outstanding. So that's really what Bitcoin's all about to me in terms of like what it's hedging against. So wait, can we switch back? Whoa. Okay. I got to figure out how those shortcuts work. But really to me, it's about hedging against the dollar losing purchasing power because Bitcoin is holding value because there's a finite amount and it's not just unlimitedly created like the United States dollar. And the dollar is created more at certain times than others, and it takes time for the new dollars that are created to get into the system and to flow into stocks. And there's going to be ups and downs. And it's not just like this straight path up, but there's no going back at this point in time. Ever since 2008, that's like, it really started way back when we got off the gold standard. And then 2008 really accelerated it because, okay, let's aggressively print to boost the economy, prop it back up, get us back on track, right? And to some extent, yes, I think, you do need that intervention to kind of stimulate things again. You don't want regular people having a difficult time for a long period of time. But also, you got to realize like creating money has long-term consequences. So just creating just means the cost of goods is going up, and that also means the price of assets is going up. And I feel like that's what's kind of happening with stocks, and it's happening with Bitcoin as well. But the thing is with Bitcoin, nobody can just go create more Bitcoin. It's being created on a steady basis, and then each time there's a Bitcoin halving, half as much is being created on a daily basis. So there's a finite amount in existence, and then it doesn't matter how high Bitcoin goes up, right? It goes to hundreds of millions in like 100 years from now, right? Just for example, you can cut it up an unlimited amount of times, right? You could just add an extra decimal place, right? If you have 0.000001 Bitcoin, okay, you want to cut it in half. Now you have 0.00000005 Bitcoin times 2. So that's really where I see the value in Bitcoin. I like to see them buy maybe another $1 billion or so throughout the course of this year. Of course, there could be some downside, right, in terms of like a short-term move with Bitcoin. Oh my gosh, it could drop to 80,000, right? It could drop to 60,000. I just don't really see a world, unless we're in a major recession, where Bitcoin goes below like even 75,000 again. I think that was kind of the bottom, right? And we kind of saw that in April. But again, anything's possible. But also, I feel like if you have so much more cash on the balance sheet, why wait to buy more Bitcoin? So that's kind of where I'm at. I still want them to do other things. I don't want them to just go full on MicroStrategy mode, full only Bitcoin strategy, which, Ryan Cohen said, hey, we're going to follow GameStop strategy. We're not following anyone's strategy, right? And his interview that was shown at the Bitcoin conference. So we'll have to see how it shakes out. And I still don't think it's abundantly clear to anybody out there, not just me, that they have to file when they buy Bitcoin because they updated their investment policy. They amended it to say like buying Bitcoin's part of our business model in terms of like delivering shareholder value and what we want to function around, so to speak. So do they truly have to file it right away? Because yes, they did file last time, but they were going to come out and say it at the Bitcoin conference. So maybe that was the reason that they had to file and say, hey, we just bought Bitcoin, because there's going to be an interview shown of our CEO and chairman saying we acquired Bitcoin. So we have to go ahead and disclose that. But maybe next earnings report comes and we see more Bitcoin on the balance sheet, right? But also maybe not. Maybe they do have to ultimately file it. We just don't know. So we got to follow the story closely, keep looking for clues, and keep seeing how it shakes out. But such nice charts. Me too. And you, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Who else we got? Big DJ, thanks for being here. Andre, appreciate you, my friend. If everyone could, drop a like. I do always appreciate that. Subscribe if you like it. I can't force you, but that would be great. And that's just really where I'm at with GameStop. And I get it. Some people are like, I've been waiting around forever. I've been holding the stock forever, right? Nothing ever happens. And to me, I think they're just focused on long-term shareholder value. And even if, right, theoretically, you bought back here, somewhere in here, if in the long term, right, we look back and then GameStop's like way up off this chart here, right? I don't want to change it because then I always have a problem resetting it. Hundreds of dollars a share. Then in hindsight, who's really going to care, right? In terms of like, oh, well, it didn't move for the longest time. And I think when you zoom all the way out like this, right, you can zoom out even more maybe. Just get some bigger candles here. It really feels like, to me, after April 2024, the downtrend was broken. We were in this elongated, like, downwards wedge. Some call it like a Dorito of Doom. Shout out Baddest Trader. I'm sure you guys have seen him. So it seems like now we're in a general uptrend, right? Like there's been some bumps along the way. And in terms of like a little bit shorter term price action, I feel like we're going to follow a similar pattern as the last time. Maybe not see this big jump, but I think we're going to kind of just stair step upwards towards 30 into the back half of the summer, into about September. That's kind of my thought, although nobody knows what's going to happen in the short term, so take that with the utmost grain of salt. But they also have all this cash, so like, do you really see a world where the share price is going down to like 15? I honestly don't, and I think if it did, there's a lot of individual investors and institutional investors lining up to buy shares, because that would mean the share price is lower than the amount of cash per share. Although you do have to just consider the dilutive shares in terms of like the convertible notes. But keep in mind, with these convertible notes, GameStop has the flexibility to be like, okay, the terms have met. It's time to convert. Okay, well, actually, we're going to pay you back in cash instead of shares. They have that choice. So if suddenly the price starts going up, it goes up to the 30s and then it floats in the 40s for a while, both notes, theoretically, the terms would be met. But then the note holders can come back and then they could say, well, we're going to pay you back in cash. And then they go issue new convertible notes and then kind of do the same thing over. So it's like essentially the idea of like raising the floor. And again, everything I'm saying, there's a lot of like, if this, then that. So it's not just like super straightforward, like, oh, this is all it's going to be. It's going to be stuff that happens over an elongated time. And just based on the events that take place, will kind of determine the next events, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of like X factors and just different things going on with the company. But we do know they sold off the Canadian operations. They're getting ready to sell off the French ones. And also keep in mind, while net income looked pretty strong, that also, this number here doesn't even account for the fact that they had impairment charges that actually hurt this bottom line. And even with that considered, right, this is the strongest first quarter they've had in a long time in terms of net income, right? You could say, oh, well, revenue's down, but revenue really wasn't down that much, and Q1 is always their weakest quarter. Think about it. People are tapped out after holiday spending. So Q1 is February, March, April. We're in the midst of Q2 right now. You have May, June, July. So we're going to get the earnings report. Probably it's usually, I think, early September when we get the next one. So we got a couple months for that. So anything can happen between now and then. Like I said, my thought is we're going to kind of stair step up slowly, with some drops down along the way towards $30 a share, kind of heading into next earnings, and we'll see. If it's another good report, maybe we jump up near the 40s, and then they're like, hey, you know what, let's do another convertible note offering. But again, I think the convertible note offerings are great. The cash is great. It gives them a lot of flexibility. But I really want to see them keep buying Bitcoin. I mean, they updated their investment policy to reflect, owning Bitcoin as part of it, or update the investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Again, it doesn't mean they need to go all in on Bitcoin, endlessly sell shares, endlessly do convertible note offerings, and then just Bitcoin. But I do think they should keep accumulating. They shouldn't just buy like the 450 million or so, whatever it's worth right now, and then say, okay, we're done. I think they should keep using a chunk of these convertible note offerings, put it into Bitcoin, can keep rising in value if everything's rising, right? But then if we go through a market crash scenario, then say, okay, let's buy a little bit more Bitcoin and potentially buy some other assets, right? Whether that be a full buyouts or shares of different stocks, I don't quite know. I think maybe even a mix of both. And I feel like that's what the board is really focusing their energy on right now. Maybe, right, a possible idea I'm just kind of toying with today, but I don't know. And I was talking with a coworker who does card grading, and he started using GameStop. I told him you can go through GameStop. He's more of a serious collector than I am, so he mostly buys and sells already graded cards, though. But he's like, I have some I want to grade. I've been waiting on it, so I'll go to GameStop. So he's been grading them through GameStop. And we were talking about how, PSA really is a stronghold in the industry, and it could be frustrating when you feel like you have a near perfect card, and then it comes back a 9 or an 8, and you're like, how much more perfect can it get, right? Like, I have one right now, Lane Hudson rookie card, who won the Rookie of the Year for the NHL this year. I'm praying it comes back a 10, but I'm nervous it's going to come back a 9. It's just a reality. And he brought up a good point. It's like, you have someone at PSA who's grading it. They're just not in a good mood that day or whatever. Or they just see that they're feeling like being really picky, where someone else is a little bit more lenient. And that's kind of the luck of the draw, right? And that's the nature of it. But also, like, where I'm going with this and where our conversation went today is he was like, yeah, like, PSA really has a stronghold on the industry. Like, if you get your card graded elsewhere, I think it's like, is it like BCG or something? It's not as valid in people's eyes, and because it's not PSA. So maybe GameStop can change that in some way, and then have their own grading service, right, under the GameStop brand. But then also, right, what you have to consider is that Nat Turner is on the board. He's CEO of Collectors, the parent company of PSA. So I would have to imagine Nat Turner / Collectors would have to be involved in that in some shape or form, right? So just kind of something to think about. But I wonder if that's something, maybe they would do and maybe they would get more involved in, because you could grade the cards faster, have a more in-house sort of operation, right? Obviously, would it be like in the physical GameStop stores, but they would have, a specific place where they were doing that, right? And they would have the cash to set that up at this time. But also, if you are going to give that a try, just like they gave NFT Marketplace a try, something else that popped in my mind recently was GameStop Player, right? I don't know if I have that on the chart here. I remember GameStop Player was something they filed a trademark for, and nothing really came of that. So my thought on that is like, it is what it is. Maybe they were toying with an idea, but they didn't decide to move forwards. And same with like the NFT Marketplace. I don't think I have it on here actually. And I still like the in-house branded products like CandyCon, Mod Retro. I want to see them do more stuff like this. I think in-house products are great. Generally speaking, they have higher margins. But I do wonder like what happened with GameStop Player. But at the same time, it's not like they put, and same with the NFT Marketplace, right, which they did have going for a while. It's not like they put all this money into it. And also keep in mind with the the NFT Marketplace a while back, that was a time where there wasn't a lot of clear rules. Like a lot of things were just uncertain. There were so many gray areas. They probably didn't want to deal with lawsuits and just like all this craziness that was going on, because at that time, like Coinbase, Gemini, all the big players were getting hit with all kinds of lawsuits, and they were like, well, tell us what to do. And then the current government and just officials in office or whatever the case were like, well, you should do this, but not that, but we can't exactly tell you. And now it seems like over the past couple of years, such as like with the stablecoin bill, and we see Circle going public, right? Or is that the name? Circle, the one that went public, that's been going crazy. I got to find it. But what we see happening is more regulatory framework, which I think is great for Bitcoin. And now, they're involved in that. And it's great for the industry as a whole. But point being, with the NFT Marketplace, it's not like they spent all this money and it was a huge L, right? It was very low cost to set up. It didn't work out. That's fine. Pack it up and move on and drive forwards. And that's just business sometimes, right? Oh, look, Nike's finally up. I feel like Nike hasn't had a big day in a long time. Circle, yeah, that's what it is. So Circle is the parent company of, is it US dollar coin or Tether? I forget. But it's been going crazy. And it is really interesting because the Fed's supposedly supposed to be cutting rates, right? And really it went up to 300. Oh my gosh, this thing is crazy. Their whole business is basically all the money that's being put into the stable coins, they're putting it into US treasuries. So 99% of their revenue is literally based upon the current interest rate. So if you get even a quarter of a basis point cut with interest rates, that's a large revenue decline for them. So I do wonder why this valuation is so high right now. I think it's just a matter of people getting excited about it, jumping into it, right? A lot of institutions playing the initial run-up IPO sort of deal. And I actually heard someone saying, I think a lot of the stuff on CNBC, a lot of bozos saying a lot of silliness, right? But I think it is nice to listen to sometimes. Gives you perspective, right? Once in a while, some people do have good points. And something I heard on there that I thought was good, can't remember the guy's name. And I'll just be working, I'll put on the background sometimes. And what he was saying is like, if there are other companies like Circle going public, right? Not stable coins, but things like Gemini and other names in the crypto industry filing to go public. So as more of them go public, like, these IPOs will kind of be less hyped up, so to speak. So it's an interesting stock to keep an eye on. I personally wouldn't touch it. I think it's extremely overvalued right now. I think the time to buy this stock would be when it's in a situation, and again, I'm no expert, right? I'm just a guy on the internet, so don't listen to me. Do your own due diligence. But I feel like the time to buy this kind of stock would be when interest rates have kind of bottomed out, and it looks like interest rates are going to be raised over the coming period of time, right? Whatever that period of time may be. And that's when you want to kind of get in, because just like how if they cut interest rates a quarter of a basis point, it significantly hurts their revenue. It significantly benefits their revenue if they raise interest rates by a quarter of a point, right? So just a crazy stock, right? Let's see the profile. It just kind of speaks to the craziness going on in the market right now. Circle Group, platform, network, and market infrastructure for stablecoin and blockchain applications, provides a suite of stablecoins related products that include network utility and application platform for organizations to benefit from stablecoins and the internet financial system, and issues a US dollar denominated stablecoin and stablecoins network, compromise Circle stablecoin, tokenized funds, liquidity, payments, developer services, as well as integration services. So only founded in 2013. right? 12 years later, they got a $50 billion valuation. What a world we live in, right? That just wasn't possible 20 years ago. The day and age of the internet has made some of these companies that come public go so big, so fast. Like, it's truly remarkable. But let's see. That's BGS Tetron, Beckett grading. It's actually harder to get a BGS 10 than it is PSA 10. Blue Blunts, thanks for being here. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that insight. Thank you. Yeah, like I've kind of been saying, I'm a relatively newer collector, so still wrapping my head around it, but thank you. Yeah, BGS. And that's crazy. It's even harder. So I wonder if there could be some kind of revolution in the industry of card grading, right? Kind of just expanding beyond PSA, but also it's hard because GameStop's partner with the biggest one. But also, why, if you can't beat them, join them, right? And obviously they're benefiting from that relationship. Wendy, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. You know, it's Friday. Just joining Espresso, hanging out, streaming. So yeah, those of you that don't know, streaming every Friday. That's my schedule right now. And by the way, you know, I feel weird always saying this, but it's actually my birthday today. Double birthday celebration night. My girlfriend's friend has the same exact birthday as me. So we'll be going out. So I can't stream too long today. But just getting this espresso, getting dialed in. And I was like, nah, it's my birthday. I already skipped last week. Can't skip this week's stream. So committed to the grind. No, but for real, it's crazy. Turning 25, time's flying. I'm now a quarter of a century old. So cheers to that. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. PSA is more popular, but both are equally respected. Beckett, maybe even a little more so. Barry, no, I appreciate that, my friend. Thank you so much, because I was honestly not as aware. I just always saw PSA, and that's really what I've kind of been just looking into and learning about. So I'm going to write that down. I'm sure I'll remember it, but just put it on my gazillion things to do list. But BGS. And yeah, I mean, it's a crazy market we're in, right? Like, Palantir drops 10% today, right? You know, market came roaring back, but then it drops after. And it's funny. It's like, oh, gold says Palantir falls on easing tensions. I don't think Palantir just suddenly fell on that, right? Maybe, sort of, kind of. I think it's more so just it's been running so hot for so long. Someone out there was like, let's take some profits, right? And a good meme that I thought was funny when, like, you know, war isn't funny, but I will admit, you know, all the memes surrounding it are kind of funny, right? And sometimes you gotta laugh in this crazy world. But it was like, the meme was like when everything was first starting, like, Iran's about to find out why Palantir trades at 115 as a price to sales ratio, or something like that, right? But crazy. I've owned Palantir a long time. I've been very fortunate. I have an excellent cost basis. I took a little bit off the table over the past couple months just because it's run up so crazy. But, you know, on the note of other stocks, also AMD is a stock I was buying since February, so I bought it like all the way down, right? So here, I bought it through here, and went up. Okay, great. Bought it down here. Should have bought heavier here, but it's come roaring back. And really, I think AMD has a lot of upside potential because they're focusing on energy efficient chips and really accelerating machine learning systems, right? So NVIDIA's done a lot in terms of like establishing LLMs, large language models. So it's not just ChatGPT and Grok. That's what a lot of people think, but also a lot of companies are building their own internal kind of chat logs, right? So they could kind of, I'm still wrapping my head all around this, full disclosure, but really companies are building different products, you know, built on AI to make the information more accessible to employees and their systems and just really integrating things. But now the issues they're running to is scaling that efficiently and also energy costs. So AMD's new round of chips coming out are focusing around that, and they're also combining a couple different chips. I think it's GPUs and CPUs. All those honestly mix me up. They're combining things together to really drive efficiency. So they're focusing on efficiency and efficient energy consumption. Or basically, like, if a chip has, like, let's just say, to use simple numbers, right? If a chip, a strength, right, just to use the most basic terms, can be anywhere from 1 to 100. Not everything everyone's running needs the chip running at 100%, right? And just like how you have a computer, and I have this computer, and it has lots of different specs and RAM, right? That's more than what I need for just streaming. So really, you don't want to have a chip working at full force if you don't actually need that much energy consumed, because you don't actually need that much power for whatever it is you're doing, right? I'm trying to use like a really basic explanation there. And again, the very specific terms. Still taking notes on that and learning about all that. But really, to me, what I see with AMD is the efficiency and the energy reduction, which are like two major things that are needed. And also, people say, oh, well, NVIDIA is the biggest in the game. Yeah, sure. But AMD has huge customers like Oracle. By the way, NVIDIA's at an all-time high. Isn't that crazy? People back here were like, oh, the run is over. Nope. It's way back. And nothing has fundamentally changed with this. It just shows you the type of market we're in. But AMD has huge customers like Oracle, Meta, aka Facebook. Of course, the other ones are slipping my mind now. There's definitely some other big ones out there. Like, I can't think of them, of course. That's always how it goes, right? But they have other big customers. But also keep in mind, these big customers, a lot of them also use NVIDIA and AMD because there's so much demand for these chips. So NVIDIA can grow, and that doesn't mean AMD can grow. I feel like AMD has a lot more upside, though, because NVIDIA's been so hyped up for so long, and AMD's kind of been forgotten about. That's my general bull case on AMD. That's where I'm at. But it's crazy to me that NVIDIA's at an all-time high. I mean, it's not that crazy, though, because, again, like this S&P 500's at an all-time high. Look at, like, Facebook, right? Meta, whatever. Still so silly to change it. They're basically at an all-time high. Everything's come roaring back since April. And again, not that much has changed, right? Yeah, some tariffs have been paused and too. Like this run up, right? And I guess we should go to SPY to truly see it. Hasn't even been really impacted, right? Was this when the global conflict started, right? It was like Father's Day when everything really escalated. What was that, like over here somewhere? And look, the market just doesn't care. The market just doesn't care. And I think it really just boils down to the fact there's just so much money in the system, and it just keeps flowing into assets over time. And also, something I heard recently, which I think is very true. Once I think about it, I heard it and kind of analyzed it, I'm like, yeah, some of the best bull markets to invest in are the most hated bull markets. People are saying, oh, but tariffs, but the Israel-Iran stuff, there's so many uncertainties. Is earnings going to be that good? And by the way, I think generally speaking, across the board, company earnings still look good in terms of like the Magnificent Seven and even beyond that. It's obviously, there's layers to that, but I feel like this bull market's hated because it's like, hey, how could this be happening? This shouldn't be happening. We're due for a crash, right? And that's kind of what I feel like was happening back here in 2020, right? I personally thought it, to be honest with you, this whole way up, I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Everything is shut down. Everything, we don't know what's going on with this COVID stuff. We could be locked down for years, right? In this area here, nobody knew what the heck was going on, right? I feel like by around 2021, it was kind of like, all right, we got to like just learn to live with this. And even before that, right? The market was ripping all-time highs. So everybody thought like, this is ridiculous. It has to crash, right? And it just never did. Yeah, you could argue, okay, by 2022 it did, right? After this crazy, unprecedented run-up. But then guess what? It never dropped anywhere near as low as it went back at that time, right? When everything shut down. Not even remotely close. And I would say this was a very hated bull market over here because it was like, how could everything keep going up? There's still so much uncertainty. But guess what? There was just money being pumped into the system nonstop, right? And we kind of had this melt up. And obviously it's not happening to the same extent right now, but you have to keep in mind, when a dollar's created, it takes time for it to go into circulation. It just doesn't go into circulation overnight. So it takes time. And I think that's kind of what's happening over time. And that's what allows for these very sharp bounce backs after the market sees a period where it's dropping. And I know I bought the dip here fairly aggressively, right? Not too crazy, right? I wish I bought more like AMD, for example, but like I opened a position in Adobe when it was only like $300 a share because it was like, this is ridiculous value. I didn't buy a ton, right? Just a few shares, but I feel like that was a great entry point. I was able to pick up like a little bit of Palantir, picked up a little bit of GameStop, right? Picked up some Bitcoin. And in hindsight, I wish I bought more of everything, to be honest. But I had friends texting saying, oh, this could be like 2008. These tariffs are so terrible and this and that. I'm like, but at the end of the day, like, if you have a long-term basis or viewpoint, then like, even if it does drop more, you just buy more, right? And that's why I feel like knowing yourself and budgeting and having like a plan as a whole is so important because you want to be like, something else that I heard that really helped me is like, it's better to have time in the market than timing the market because nobody ever knows what's going to happen in the short term. So if you're just adding into the market and spending more time in the market on a long-term basis, it's going to do well for you. And also, there's some stat out there where it's like, if you missed just like the 10 or 15 biggest green days, right? If you took like the biggest single day gains by percentage over the last 5 years, your total return versus someone who held that whole way would have been half of that person. So if you're trying to time the market and you just miss even some of the biggest days, right? Like back here, like we had a major green day. I think this one, it was like a 10% day, right? This was crazy. And then we had, drop back, but then another couple strong days and drop, and then some really strong days here. If you miss those, right, trying to time the market, your returns could be significantly slashed. So to me, it's about budgeting, planning, and really just being ready for when that dip comes so you can aggressively buy. And you think, oh my gosh, but it dips more. Okay, but that's why you budget. You have cash on the sidelines that you're ready to continue to deploy. And when this dip comes, right, I didn't just shove all the chips in, right? Because I knew, I was like, well, it could go lower. I feel good about the bounce back, but also these opportunities don't always come. I have to take some quote unquote risk here and add to the market. But to me, it's not even really risk because I have a long-term viewpoint when I'm investing. So if it drops more, so be it. And then that's why I'm also, putting money on the side each week to continue to allocate to stocks. So I'll continue to allocate as time goes on. And sure, we're in an elongated bear market. Okay. Eventually I got to stop the aggressiveness, so to speak. But that's why out of each check, I'm dollar cost averaging into things so that I'm continuing to add, right? It's something I've been dollar cost averaging since February. AMD. So I don't have to think about it too much. And so far it's worked out well. And with GameStop, I'm just buying here and there, but that's mostly because I essentially dollar cost average, right? Like I didn't have an auto buy on, but for a long time with GameStop, I would just buy, right? All through here. All through here, right? So those of you who don't know, I got really lucky with an option in the beginning days of GameStop in terms of the craziness. Played options all through here, and then right around August, I remember 2021, I was like, I'm done buying options. Right? So just been buying shares this whole way down here. And honestly, I really don't buy as many these days, to be quite frank with you, just because I accumulated for so long a position I'm comfortable with. And I think that's what it comes down to. You got to know thyself. And something I've been doing more recently is I'll sell options on GameStop. So I'll put up cash collateral and I do the wheel strategy when it gets exercised, like what happened to me here, because I had sold an option prior to this big drop. Okay, now I have 100 shares. I'll keep selling calls at that same price point, right? So I had sold a $28 put. It dropped down. Okay, now I was obligated to buy 100 shares at $28 a piece. I'll turn around and I'll keep selling $28 calls till it goes back above 28. And then guess what? I'll switch back and keep going back to selling cash secured puts. So that's the wheel strategy. And to be perfectly clear, I'm doing that entirely separate from my long-term holding with GameStop. And that's option selling, not option buying. So I feel like time is on my side when you're selling an option, because when you're buying an option, you're fighting against time decay, theta, whereas theta is on your side when you're selling the option, right? And again, that's something I started doing on the side where I built up a little portfolio. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this entirely separate, see how it goes. And so far it's worked out pretty good for me over the course of the past year. And that's mostly because GameStop's been trending up. Now is a little bit of a quote unquote difficult time, but that's fine. I'll keep selling some calls until it comes back to the point where I can turn around and sell puts again. I know some are going to say, oh, Tetra, that means you're bearish. You're selling calls. Oh my gosh. But to me, it's something I'm trying. And I was talking about knowing thyself. You might say, oh, well, you said in the past, like, I don't do options. Okay, but you have to be able to evolve and learn and be willing to shift. And for me, I see this as an opportunity for side income. And I feel very, very familiar with GameStop stock. So it's the stock I feel most comfortable with selling options. I tried selling options on Mara. Didn't work out well. I didn't know the company well enough, right? And that's not to say I'm not going to buy shares of GameStop anymore for the long term, or not hold my shares of GameStop for the long term. But it's just something separately I'm doing. And I feel like that's what the stock market's all about and investing is all about. Like learning what's the best strategy for you and best way for you to go about things. And it's a continuous learning game. So you have to be able to pivot over time. And that's just where my head's at. But Peace, my popular. Happy birthday. Thank you again, Wendy. And then Blackman says, dip before the rip. I think potentially, honestly. I mean, I feel like, I was saying a little earlier, I feel like we're going to stair step up towards 30 into late August, early September, right around earnings again. It'll be floating around 30. We got a great report. Boom, big jump, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. So we'll see. But let's see. So the numbers, right? What can we see for Q2? Let's kind of look ahead of that. Let me finish my espresso. Take another sip, rather. But the most encouraging thing I think we could see that's kind of a long shot, I think we'll absolutely get positive net income. I think we could even get triple digits, dare I say, of net income in terms of like being over 100 million in net income. But if they sell the French operations and there's some impairment charges related to that, maybe not. But I think we could easily see 100 million for this quarter coming up. What I think will be tough to see is to match or beat 798 million. I think it's going to come in probably around the same number as Q1. I mean, because if you look at last year, right? Q1 was stronger than Q2. Yes, we have PSA this year, but also keep in mind, as far as I'm aware, Canadian operations, that revenue was still added in for Q1 because the sale technically closed in May, which is technically Q2. So a little bit of a gray area there. We've got to do a little bit more digging on that. So I feel like the low 700s is what we're going to see for the top line, but then the bottom line will be 100 million. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Margins, I think we're going to see a similar gross margin, around 35%. Operating, I think, will be positive, and I believe that number will be maybe a solid 1-2%, and then net margin with all the extra cash, I think it's going to be close to 10%. Because you do have to keep in mind, this recent cash won't be that they just raised will have only been in the company's bank account, right, or money market account, treasuries, whatever the case, where they're earning their interest for only about half the quarter because they raise it, mid-June. Mid-June is the halfway point of Q2. And then SG&A, I think we're going to see a similar number to Q1. And then as a percentage, I really want to see them get that below 30%. I really like that they had that going in 2023, and now 2024, it crept back up in terms of percentage. The overall gross number did decline, but I want to see it continue to stay near, the low 220s. And then as a percentage, maybe more like 29%, right? So these are just kind of spitballing some numbers there. And then these are the store changes year over year, so you got to consider this as well, right? So overall, they have 23% less locations. What does that look like next year? Obviously, you'll have the Canadian ones dropping off. You'll have the French ones as part of Europe. It seems like pretty much all of Europe is being wrapped up. It seems like they're just going to keep United States domestic operations going and Australia operations going, and maybe small parts of Europe where they can still turn a profit, right? But we'll have to see. It all, you can predict all you want, theorize all you want, but it all comes down to what are the actual numbers, and we won't get any until September. Maybe we finally get a number that they bought Bitcoin. Honestly, I think if we did, it probably would give the stock a nice little bump. But at the same time, it's GameStop. You don't know, right? Isn't it funny how they bought Bitcoin and then that was like right here, right? May 28th, the exact day they bought Bitcoin was the peak. As of late, show me any other company that's bought Bitcoin and made Bitcoin a treasury reserve asset on their balance sheet, and then this happened. There's none. So, and then people say, oh, well, because they didn't buy as much as we thought. They still bought 500 million. Like, that's crazy. That's a huge amount. So, it's crazy. I think buying in the money leaps is the play with this IV. This IV is low. Diablo, thanks for being here. That's a fair point, and I just realized I don't have all chat on, so I apologize if I miss anything before. I was trying to put the all chat. I welcome the Bulls, welcome the Bears, but that's a great point. IV is relatively low right now, so it's not like IV really dropped off after here, right? So I sold another put after this drop off, which was great because the prices held up, and also IV dropped off, which is good if you're option seller for IV to be higher than fall lower. Now, if you want to buy options, right? If you want to buy a call, in theory, now is an optimal time because, we had a big drop as of late. And also, like you mentioned, implied volatility is pretty low. But again, I'm just a guy on the internet, so don't listen to me. Please make sure to do your own due diligence and research and make your own determinations. But in theory, speaking just from a volatility perspective, IV is low. So it's actually not the most optimal time to be selling options right now. So I'm kind of just treading water, kind of just hoping for some volatility to creep in, and then that's good for an option buyer right now because then more volatility means, in theory, the price of your options going up, especially if the stock price is going up. And then as an option seller, I'm like, okay, if volatility jumps up, price jumps up, great. I can sell a cash secured put, collect more premium than I would be able to now. Had an option for 24.16 today. Oh my god, I'm so sick of this. So many other great stocks have over here getting screwed left and right. Trying to stay optimistic. GME, by the way, Agent Smith, thanks for being here. Listen, man, there's always going to be ups and downs, and you gotta always manage risk, right? And just understand, with options, there's always risk. So you gotta know thyself and understand your risk tolerance. And listen, maybe you want to play some other stocks. I think that's totally okay. And you got to understand the nature of the GameStop situation in terms of just convertible notes being offered, so much cash, so many institutions betting against it in various forms, right? Not just straight short interest. Also, you have complicated swaps and other complicated financial instruments used to push the price down. And also, there's also going to be institutions that just decide to sell sometimes. So there's always so many factors at play. So, you could play some other things, but also understand with GameStop, I think trying to buy options is extremely difficult in terms of timing it. I just don't get what they're going to do with the money. Like the desert misses the rain. Thanks for being here. The truth is, I don't think anybody knows exactly what they're going to do with the money. What I want them to do is buy some more Bitcoin, but then also keep that other cash ready to go to be deployed to different assets. And whether that be complete buyouts or buying shares of other companies, I think is really to be determined. And I think they're going to take their time. They don't want to overpay for anything. They're going to seek out good opportunities, either opportunity or opportunities. And by buying some Bitcoin, right? So I want to see them buy around another $1 billion of Bitcoin or so over the next few months, by the end of the year at least. Because then it's like, okay, yes, cash is losing purchasing power over time. But if they're holding some Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they're essentially hedging against that. And then in a market crash scenario, or when they see, okay, we've taken our time, we've done our due diligence, this is the time to go ahead and deploy this capital to make this acquisition or buy shares in this. Then they'll be able to do that without rushing. I would rather them take their time and make the right decision than rush into making a decision just because they have the cash and they have to use it, right? That's kind of where my head's at right now. So I want them to still buy more Bitcoin, but also you don't have to go all in on Bitcoin. You don't have to be a MicroStrategy. There's no need. That's love, Brody. It's all good, man. It's all good, Agent Smith. I appreciate you being here. Buy AMC, sell GME. I can't even read your name. Is that how you say your name? I don't even know how to pronounce your name, but AMC. Ooh. I'm sorry. I can't get behind that one. I just can't. Adam Aaron is too much of a clown to me. Too much of a clown. How's it doing these days? Not too good. Look at this. You literally would be down 99% if you bought AMC back here. Just so you know. Even in like July. It's crazy. Or August 2022. It's insane. It's criminal, actually. And then, by the way, this wasn't even the high. It's because they did that reverse split. Remember Ape was supposed to save the day? All it really did was pump up executive pockets, right? Or pad the pockets of the executives. I guess that's the term I was looking for. But oh man, what a crazy market we're in. I think I'm gonna wrap it up in a few minutes just because I got ready to go out tonight. Birthday plans, so it should be fun hanging out with the squad. But listen, like I was saying before, I think we'll kind of stair step upwards, especially if we continue to be in a bull market to the later half of the summer. And then in terms of the general market, it's anticipated the Fed's gonna cut rates, but I don't know, like they're not, and like everything seems good to cut rates, but then they don't know. Maybe it's not time. So I think if we don't ultimately get any rate cuts by the end of the year, the market might not like that, right? So that's kind of something to keep in mind with the market as a whole. But in terms of GameStop, I think the balance sheet looks great. They're still moving in the right direction in terms of doing the little things. SG&A, a little bit lower, margins getting better, net income getting better. And what would be really exciting if by 2026 we get back to revenue growth. They're like, okay, we've pretty much trimmed. We'll close a store here and there when it's not operating well. So be it, because we focus on that profitability. But it won't be like massive amounts of stores, right? Like year over year, 2025 versus 2024, 2024 versus 2023, where they closed 23% of total stores. If they close like 1 or 2% of stores, then they should be in a good spot, especially with PSA being, primarily online. Yes, you have the PSA grading in stores, but that's still a newer thing. But overall, I think revenue growth in 2026 is very doable. But then on top of it, right, I don't think it's just about the revenue growth story. I think it's really about what they do with that cash. And again, I don't think they're only going to do Bitcoin. I just don't. I don't know. I just don't see that being the case unless they're mostly going to keep cash, buy some Bitcoin, or let's say they spend that $1 billion in Bitcoin over the next half year, next 5 months or so. But then market crash comes, okay, we're going to aggressively buy Bitcoin, right? Instead of buying other stuff. But I feel like they would buy other assets as well. So GameStop will invest the cash in something when the Fed cuts rates. It could be Diablo. It could be what they're kind of standing by for. So we'll see, because the Fed's being stubborn right now. And I feel like part of it is like the whole butting heads with like Trump and Powell. But I mean, I think taking politics out, which is what the Fed is supposed to do, it seems time to cut rates, right? It seems time to cut rates. But I don't know. I don't get to make that decision, right? So how are we looking on revenue per store versus last year? Diablo, I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. I haven't calculated that recently. That might be a good thing. I got to write that down. But you also got to keep in mind, like, so much of it is e-commerce, so it's hard to kind of balance that out. But I'm going to write that down. Something to circle back on. Per store on GameStop. I've got my notepad here just scribbling down, but still trying to figure out why there's suddenly so many leveraged GME ETFs and such high short interest. Like Desert Mist in the Rain. Listen, man, I feel like it's really just the continuous tomfoolery with GameStop. But in terms of the leveraged ETFs, it's not that absurd, because I just found out there's like a Palantir ETF. Let me see if I can find it. That literally pays out dividends weekly because they're just selling like covered calls or something. It's very bizarre. We are getting into a crazy market, or a crazy world, where there are so many complex financial instruments, like these ETFs that trade at like 2 times, like it's like a 2 times GameStop ETF. I've heard of that one. Then there's other ones that'll like take a stock like Palantir, they'll buy it, and then they'll sell like covered calls on it as well. So it won't move up as much as Palantir when it moves up, but it will keep yielding like weekly dividends. It's very bizarre. Very bizarre. And I don't touch that stuff because I don't fully understand it. If I don't fully understand it, can't entirely wrap my head around it. Like, I get the concepts, but like it just seems a little like to me. So do we get store counts in the 10K only? I believe so, Diablo. I believe so, because the 8K is a little bit less, in depth, but 10K should definitely have it. So that might be kind of a stat we have to look at year over year, and we'll have to wait a little bit because we only just got Q1. But 2025's looking up. I do got to wrap it up now. Wow, it's crazy how time flies. Already 6 o'clock. Cheers. Going to finish the espresso. And we're ready to rock and roll. But we'll see how it shakes out. So I think EPS will go up. I think revenue, down year over year. Kind of hold steady, though, close to Q1, ideally, right? Really supported by PSA, increased PSA revenue. And then margins. They can keep pushing those forwards. SG&A. Can't push it down forever, right? So it'll probably float around this amount. Percentage-wise, though, you'd like to see that number come down. And then the flexibility with the cash, right? The flexibility with the cash. And again, I think they'll buy some more Bitcoin, but they're going to look to use that cash for other opportunities, whether that be an acquisition or individual investments. I'm not too sure. And I'll be covering the story no matter what happens. So if you feel like subscribing, sticking with me, I appreciate that. Drop a like. That's also appreciated. And thank you so much for being here. I will be live streaming again next Friday. Gonna maybe drop a video or two throughout this week, and just getting situated. Trying to enjoy the summer, but also keep grinding away, working on my craft, keep reading. That's really the best way you can continue to improve in this market. As much as CNBC has a bunch of bozos at times, and like there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. People write, talk about. It's the internet, right? Everyone can do whatever they want with the markets, but it's kind of, you want to be able to consume as much as you can without driving yourself crazy, right? You need balance. Sometimes you got to go touch grass, but also like see all perspectives. And then be able to say, okay, I don't agree with that because I believe this, this, and this. Or I do agree with that because I see these details backing up that claim, right? And that just takes time and practice and honestly energy of just putting it into reading what's going on in the market. But for me, I'll just keep dollar cost averaging stocks I like and Bitcoin because it's plain and simple. You don't have to think too hard about it. And then if we get a major dip like we did in April, fine, so be it. I'll go ahead and manually buy some more shares beyond my DCA. So that's just me. Oh yeah, margin should drop a bit on Switch 2 release, but 100 million net income is doable. I agree, and that's a good point. That's a good point with the Switch coming out. There's not a huge margin on that, but that should also kind of help the top line sales, right? And we'll see a lot of that in Q2. So maybe revenue can be stronger than Q1 because of this sort of console. I would say mini console cycle, right? It's not like an Xbox, PlayStation console cycle. But then, yeah, maybe revenue, net income is more like 80, 90 million. But I still think 100 million is doable, to be honest with you, like you kind of said. So, yeah, thanks again for being here. Appreciate you guys very much. If you want to follow me on X, I haven't been posting as much on there, honestly going on there as much because X is just so much craziness. It just gives me so much like political crap and just, it just hurts my brain being on this. But I'll get back to it at some point. Kind of just digressing from it right now, I guess. But yeah, I'll post on there at some point at Tetron Invest. And sooner than later, I know I've been saying it, I'm just taking my time with it, but I'm getting ready to rebrand to Tetron Talks. Maybe a new logo, maybe not. Not going to go too fast with it, but sooner than later, it will be Tetron Talks instead of Tetron Invest. But sticking with the name Tetron, so I think you guys get the idea. But thanks again for being here. Hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Take a break from the market, relax, spend some time with friends or family, and reset. And yeah, I appreciate you guys very much. Take care.